Hi, everybody. This is Matt Hawes of The Happy Show and of Comics Limited in Evansville, Indiana. And I'm here to make a video about another video of mine, a previous video I made years ago, over 10 years ago, but there's actually one more recent that was a revision of that video. I've discussed these all before on the channel, and what it is, it's the Paul is Dead rumor, hoax, whatever you want to call it, conspiracy, whatever your view is on that. My video is actually called Cranberry Sauce, Examination of the Paul is Dead hoax, which the original version was made 10 years ago, but there was a prototypical version that was made even further back than that. Now, I went on about this in past videos, but I'll do a quick recap as quick as I can here to kind of get you up to speed on what this is all about and what my whole deal is with the videos and such. Okay, so first off, when I was a teenager, I was actually a casual Beatles fan in the strictest sense that I heard them on the radio like anybody else who has. Even to this day, you know, you still hear them played and stuff on oldies but goodies channels and classic rock channels and, you know, typical. And pretty much even the younger people now still, I mean, you know who the Beatles are. Even if you don't regularly listen to them and such, you're aware of them. They're iconic, you know, and legendary and all that. So, of course, at however old I was at the time, I knew of the Beatles, obviously, but I liked some of their songs I had heard on the radio, but I never really listened to their albums as a rule, and only knew those ones that you would hear on the oldies but goodies stations and such. And so I didn't really have much interest in seeking out their albums, believe it or not, until I got this book called Big Secrets I think I got from the library. It's called Big Secrets, and it's not one of these crazy, weird conspiracy kind of things. Thank God, I was never really into that sort of thing, at least not as far as believing it. Actually, no, this was really more a debunking kind of book. It talks about or at least investigative. It wasn't debunking everything. It was investigating certain things. Some of it was as mundane as what is the secret recipe to Kentucky Fried Chicken and such. You know, they rent out a lab and all this other stuff to try and figure out what ingredients goes in there, or what's the secret initiations into the Mason stuff, and all this other stuff. It ran the gamut, and they had a chapter on backwards masking, that's reversing audio on records, and this book was released in the 80s, and so this is during a time of the era of satanic panic, so I don't know if that was the reason they include this in there. I'm sure that was part of the logic. So they go over the history of the rock and roll history up to that point, and decide to rent out studio, and this was pre-computer age and stuff, so they went into the studio, and then they took these different recordings of different rock bands, and reversed them and all this such to see, to give a conclusion on whether they thought it was intentional backwards masking, if it was just a phonetic coincidence or whatever. They just give their own conclusions on that. And because they're going through this, they start with one of the earliest known examples of that, especially supposedly intentional, which is the Beatles with their backwards masking, as opposed to just simply using backwards snippets of guitar and stuff like that, which they were also innovator in that. But that was intentional, the musical aspect, artistic. This other one, who knows if it was intentional or not? That's the mystery. But it talked about the Paul is Dead rumor, which that was first I had heard of that, and it fascinated me. I always liked monster movies in particular as a kid. I would say horror movies, but really it leaned more towards monsters and strict horror. And I just had a sense of macabre on some subjects. Enough that's fascinating to me. But I so I didn't, not that I even believed any of that when I read this, and this book wasn't purporting that it was true or not. It was simply just examining the backwards masking and then gave a little bit of that history. But it fascinated me. It got me to buy the Beatles albums and such, or back in those days, cassettes, which there was actually a method where you could reverse the audio on a cassette. It's a procedure, and I didn't do it with the original cassettes I bought from the store, the official tapes. I would dub it onto another tape, then reverse the spools on that. My friend had told me how you can do that by flipping the spools and rethreading it this whole procedure again, but it served the same purpose as reversing, audio. If you would like the other people who broke their turntables going backwards to hear these messages. So, anyway, the reason why I bring this up is so I decided. I mean, I got me, like I said, to buy those albums, and I became an actual Beatles fan, so much so that to this day, I say they're my favorite band. Where, like I said, at the time, I was more or less on, it was just something I heard every once in a while because I got to hear tracks you never hear on the radio, even to this day, unless they're doing retrospective or whatever on the group or a special, but just in terms of just general radio play. And not that, like I said, wasn't already a fan of some of the big hits from the radio, but this really brought home, and I realized I got more into the Beatles, and except that never, like I said, never fell for the high idea that Paul had actually passed. Even at that age, it didn't make sense to me that this guy who was in Wings, the band after he was with the Beatles, and all this other stuff, that guy was not the same guy that was Paul in the '60s, and just so happy he was replaced by a equally, if not arguably, more talented individual who just happened to be a skilled singer and a skilled musician, and a skill as far as writing songs, which one of the best, greatest songwriters of all time, him with his partner John Lennon. And it's like, wow, they really score there. They not only got to look like who could sound like him and all this, but they got that now. So it was always nonsensical to me. Sorry if I'm running anything for people who want to believe in that, and it's fine if you do. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying whatever. But I was fascinated, and and I've never always been fascinated with it, but I kind of purged a bit of my attraction to it with making the cranberry sauce video, because that was a culmination or whatever of dealing with that whole thing all those years, and pretty much kind of burnt myself up. I burnt myself out on it a little bit after that whole procedure was finished, but it still always have a place in my heart, and I always have some fascination for it. But in my earliest Happy shows, whenever it was public access TV show pre-YouTube in 2003, on the Halloween episode, I did a half-hour long special that basically dealt with what I knew, which was quite a bit because I've read about through those years since the '80s, and this was 2003. I made a special that dealt with that traffic, and so I went ahead and got that together, and then I decided to put that, like I said, on the show, make a special Halloween episode out of it, presented some of the album covers, and magazines stuff I had that kind of connected to that I had at the time. Then, let's see, it was 2010, so about 7, 8 years later, I decided I was going to do a full-fledged documentary style kind of thing on this Paul is Dead thing. And I was going to call it Cranberry Sauce because on Strawberry Fields, there's supposed to be a part where you're at the very end of the fade out, you hear what appears to be John Lennon saying, "I buried Paul." And John, when he was questioned about that during the period, would say, "No, I was just climbing around. I say cranberry sauce, cranberry sauce." And just the way he said it and vocalized it at the very end with all this what's the word I'm looking for? A whole bunch of sounds and stuff going on. It made it unclear what he was saying. You had to listen close, and that's what some people gathered was it said, "I buried Paul," especially whenever the whole ideal that Paul died and was replaced came out, and these were supposed to be clues left on the albums by the other Beatles. And if you listen, it does sound like cranberry sauce, okay, when you really listen. But anyway, that's why I called it Cranberry Sauce, an examination of the Paul is Dead hoax. And that was the 2010 when I did that. I did a lot of research on it, more than I've done before. I really went wild on it because I wanted to make this as definitive as I could. There's always stuff being added. I was going to discount there's a lot of people who really go deep into believing this and believing conspiracies for different reasons, because conspiracy people, always, unfortunately, that go too wild. But I want to stick with pretty much what was known during the 60s and early 70s, the stuff that kicked it off, and then examine that. I wasn't going to get wilder and wilder with what people come up with years later, but based off of that information and examine. Now, I do lean towards, without getting into the whole thing, more than I intended to, I do believe that there was some kind of thing with the Beatles involved with this. I don't believe Paul died, obviously, from what I've already told you, and but yet there are certain clues that, oddly enough, do kind of sync up enough, and just certain little things and other things you can find watching Cranberry Sauce. Certain details I mentioned that kind of lead me to believe yeah, I think they did it for a marketing gimmick. Now, a lot of people think, well, why would they do it? They had enough money and popularity. Well, no, any band. I mean, the Rolling Stones would still tour. The money and wanting to be out there in the public and doing publicity and stuff, that's always a constant. Besides, it also, as some people know, that it could be their sense of humor and such. And they didn't ever come out and acknowledge it because it probably wouldn't be a smart thing to acknowledge, especially the surviving two Beatles at this point, if there is anything to that. And maybe there isn't. Maybe it was all just total coincidence that some fans concocted themselves and just found enough stuff on the albums that would fall in line with that, with what they were coming the story they came up with. But again, I tend to think, like I said, somewhere in the middle. I certainly don't believe Paul died or whatever, but I do believe that maybe the Beatles did stick in those initial clues, and then later on people build and like I said, come up with their own conspiracies and more so that this thing branches out into this really wild story that was way further than what the more simplified version was in 1969 that they gave. So anyway, watch the Cranberry Sauce video if you want to know anything more about that. In fact, this is a long-winded way because I want to bring up people to speed who may have just checked on this video and aren't realized about my other videos, on this subject. That I want to mention a comment that I made because it goes into this whole deal where these conspiracy people sometimes just go way out there. But before I get there, I should also explain. I said I have a revision video. What it is in 10,000, and I mentioned this also on another vlog of mine a few years ago, I think. But basically what happened was my 2010 video hit like over 10,000 views, and then it got taken down by YouTube for a copyright claim, which was kind of bunk, I think, because, I know they're strict on things, but I still believe it fell under fair usage for purposes of discussion, education. Sincerely, I mean, all this is, this is the whole thing, examining that lore. And it does serve educational purposes, research purposes, and all the review purposes, all the things that a fair usage allows for when you use clips and stuff. There was no complete song play. There was only fractions of songs being played and such to begin with, and certain video footage. But that wasn't already public domain. But it got taken down, like I said, which was really perplexing because there was another person who took my video, chopped it in two. It's a long video. It's 2 hours. They chopped roughly around 2 hours. They chopped it in two and made two parts. Oddly enough, they excised my credit. They did a little rotten edit that cut out my credit in the beginning of the first part. But in the second part, they let the end credits run full. As far as I can tell, if I remember, there wasn't no edit in there and that. So if you're going to obscure I guess they figured people weren't going to stick through the credits, and they wanted, I guess, to claim that they made it. I don't know what the purpose was. I didn't care that they shared the video. It wasn't made for profit. Technically, it can't be because I would have to worry about rights issues and stuff to be able to profit from it. It was always just meant to be a fun video to put out there to be shared. I didn't mind that other people put it on their channel as well, but I didn't like the fact that mine got taken down and it shouldn't have. And then this person who put it in two parts, somehow it's remained for years on their channel. And I was fine, it got seen, but then he removed my credit on the first part. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Just leave it alone. If you're going to put it up, put it up, but just don't alter it. Anyway, After a few years later, I just, it kept bugging me like that was happening. So in 2020, about a couple of years ago, I did this newer version, which it was basically a re-edit. It's pretty much it mostly is the cranberry sauce video. It's in its entirety. It's got actually a little bit extra in some ways, and a few little snippets here and there. Most of the stuff was taking music and using alternate versions, because I wasn't really allowed to use the actual released version of the track. Even if it was just a snippet, just to use as an example of one of the clues. I found ways to get around that with the audio, where it wasn't exactly the audio track, but or it was minus. I was able to get rid of the background music so that it wouldn't get stricken for copyright or whatever. And same with video footage. I had to do a little bit of some of the video footage, a little bit of nonsense, just so I could get it to be accepted. And after some trial and error with using my other YouTube channel for the Happy Show channel on YouTube, where I put in parts, and you can still see it there in parts. I was using that honestly in parts to do 10 minutes, roughly 10-minute segments or so. I did chapters actually throughout the video, or throughout the original documentary. So each chapter I uploaded independently, and then if it got stricken for some copyright thing or whatever, I could see what it was and go and act on that. So when I did that, I assembled the whole thing together as one whole and uploaded it to this channel, which at the present, currently it's got now 17,000 views. So it's finally exceeded the 10,000 that the previous one had hit. So that's really cool, and it seems to be growing and such. And thanks for everybody watching. Even the people who believe he really died. I don't have nothing against you. I just don't agree with you on that idea. And my video was made to be unbiased, more or less. If you pay attention, if you watch it, and you listen to the way I wrote it and everything else, I don't cast a judgment call one way or another. I purposely did it that way to leave it up to the viewers, because I didn't want to tell people what to think. I might say my views more blatantly right here in a vlog, but for that piece of stating on its own, I just want to present the information and the facts as I know them, as I was able to gather them, and present them in that video in one whole work, and then let you decide, you the viewer decide, if you think Paul really did die and was replaced by a lookalike, and they left all those clues and all that. But the reason I bring this up is you get all sorts of, like I said, of those weird conspiracies that people have come up with. I mean, that's beyond what the original thing was supposed to be. And some of them are really crazy. I'm not delving into them, and I don't usually comment on a lot of the comments left on the video, because I don't want to get wrapped up into that. Plus, I want just to have free discussion there. I let people say whatever they want on there, because that's part of the fascination and fun of having that video presented, is to see what people think and what they'll say. But this last one, I had to comment. And honestly, that's kind of why I make this video. I'm looking at the time that I've taken to give you this preamble before I get to the meat of what I'm really doing. But it's just hilarious to me that this guy, he left a comment, and he was saying, the one I really feel bad for is the real Paul's kids who were cheated out of their money. Now, if you know anything about the Beatles, and you know the time frame I'm talking about, and you know anything about the Paul is dead rumor, or if you don't, watch it and come back here, okay? Because it's a long watch, but I think it's an entertaining one. But if you watch it, or if you know anything about it, there's something you should know. By 1966, when Paul was supposed to have died, the real Paul was supposed to have died in 1966, right? Well, Paul wasn't married and didn't have kids. So if you believe the real Paul died in 1966, unless you believe in yet another conspiracy, totally unrelated from that one, this guy's comment made me think, okay, do you believe that Paul McCartney was secretly married and had his own kid? John Lennon, I think by 66, I think John Lennon was the only one who had a kid. Ringo might have. I can't remember how old his son is, but there were only two that were married and had kids. I think by 66. I'm not for sure. Ringo, I should know this off the top of my head, but I know it's in that area. John, definitely, he had a kid and a wife by this point. Paul wasn't. He was dating Paul Asher, Jane Asher. He was dating Jane Asher, and if he had died in 1966, that's where it would have ended. He hadn't even met Linda yet. Linda McCartney, who was Linda Eastman at that point. So I just find it fascinating. I actually made this video just to discuss that part, where that guy's comment. Because it just shows you how crazy people can get about these things. Well, anyway, let me know what you think. Yay!